There have been many attempts to encapsulate and explain the many mysteries that surround us. These include everything from the contents of the Vatican's secret archives, the paranormal and ufology, and even subjects that seem to slip between the cracks of reality into the realm of high strangeness. And now the United States government has finally admitted that many of the unexplained sightings of craft may very well be alien technology. This film draws on all of these threads as it weaves its way through the many twists, turns, and possibilities that define the subjects discussed. Just about all of the subjects examined in this film are interlinked at one level or another. It is as if the ancient Eastern concept of oneness was recognized by our forefathers long before the arcane physics of quantum mechanics demonstrated its reality. Perhaps this is a contributing factor to the belief that all points in space and time are interconnected. In fact, it is thought that this particularity is how UFOs manage to traverse the incredible distances between the stars and perhaps even the galaxies. Of course, from our current level of knowledge, the mechanics of such technology can only be speculated upon, or can it? We are about to discover. This film will discover and explain who these aliens are, how they come, and why. We begin with anti-gravity. The concept of an anti-gravity device has been the dream of scientists and physicists for many, many years. Although several have tried and failed to create a machine that can produce this effect. Perhaps in the ancient past, our forefathers actually managed to achieve this remarkable feat. Was this on their own, or might they have had some unusual help? The first such devices to use anti-gravity technology may have been the vimanas, often mentioned in the sacred Hindu Sanskrit texts called the Vedas, which date from between 1500 and 700 BC. These astonishing devices were used by the gods as they traveled from the heavens to the earth. But more worryingly, they also used them to wage catastrophic wars around the planet. In addition, these ancient texts repeatedly refer to not just machines that defy gravity and flew, but all kinds of sophisticated weapons that used technology we can only guess at. This information also appears in the Indian classic, the Mahabharata, which is one of the oldest books in the world. And it mentions a flying chariot with sides of iron that was clad with wings. The Rig Veda describes one of the weapons used by the vimanas. It is called Indragni, and it was a weapon that used two types of force. The ancient Hindu texts described the first half of the word, Indra, as the kinetic energy of subatomic particles that ignite and burn. The second half of the word, Agni, is described as a fire that is both thermonuclear and electric. Modern commentaries about this weapon suggest that it may have been a plasma-based device and it was activated by sound. A passage in the Bhagavad Gita, which forms part of the Mahabharata, describes a planet-wide disaster caused by a weapon described as a ray of iron. This ray of iron melted the ground and rocks and turned them into glass. According to the Mahabharata, the vimanas were kept in Vimanagriha, or buildings that served the same purpose as aircraft hangars. The Ramayana, the work of equal age and importance to the Mahabharata, describes these machines as double-deck circular aircraft with portholes and a dome that flew with the speed of the wind and emitted a melodious sound. Amazingly, these craft were also supposedly used not only in Earth's atmosphere, but also in space and even underwater. The power for the vimanas reputedly came from a mysterious engine that used liquid mercury as the power source, and one of these craft was allegedly found in a cave in Afghanistan during the recent conflict. It is known that in 2010, 4 world leaders paid unscheduled visits to Afghanistan. Had they been told about what had been found? People still hold rituals and ceremonies to honor ancient beings inside caves. It is the use of a cave due to the fact that it is hidden and mysterious and has strange properties, or is some long-forgotten race memory of a previous existence, and are they still trying to make contact with their ancestors? Here we have this strange connection with the same thin, faceless entities seen thousands of miles away in the cave near Karama in India. The Maya also had similar beliefs. This time they involved a place called Xibalba, which means the place of fear. Again, it is underground and is ruled by various fearsome death gods. The entrance to this vast underground world was believed to be via a cave near Coban in Guatemala. There are similar cave systems in nearby Belize that are also thought to be entrances to Xibalba. Oddly, and perhaps significantly, some Mayan legends say that our galaxy, the Milky Way, is the real road to Xibalba. Is this the reference to extraterrestrials who were involved with the human race from the very earliest times? Does it also imply that the caves may have once served as portals between worlds, and that the portals served as two-way streets, in that there was passage in both directions? Once again, one has to ask if the wall art is an attempt by our ancestors to depict what they saw. All of this seems to add fuel to the legitimate question, what were these ancient people attempting to depict? As if this was not enough, there are also indications that this mysterious underworld might be even stranger than we can imagine. Because deep underground there are the crystal caves, vast caverns filled with huge crystals. One spectacular example is a cave which is 1,000 feet below Nica in Chihuahua in Mexico. It was discovered by miners in the year 2000 and is accessed via the Nica mine. These crystals are huge and are formed from selenite, which is a form of gypsum. The largest of these crystals is 39 feet long, 13 feet in diameter, and an estimated 55 tons in weight. The thing about crystal is that it is an ideal medium for information storage, and it is usual for various kinds of crystal to be used in computer networks for information and data storage. Another curious fact about this cave is that samples taken from the water that once flooded it have revealed microbes that are unknown to science, and they are well in excess of 10,000 years old. Might this giant crystal cave in Mexico have been left as a kind of data storage facility by the beings worshipped by our ancestors because it is capable of holding an incredible amount of data? It is possible that this might even be the fabled Hall of Records, or even the legendary Akashic Records, which contain every single piece of information concerning the human race. Every thought, word, emotion, event, and deed that has ever occurred or will ever occur. Might caves like this even be a part of a worldwide communication device that could still allow us to communicate with the gods, our creators, because various crystal caves exist all over the planet? Another curious fact is that obelisks that have been built both in the past and in modern times all have a similar crystalline shape to those in the crystal cave. Does this mean that people who made them were unconsciously accessing race memories to recreate the crystals that may have allowed communication with the gods? At one time, the Great Pyramid was also caped with granite, yet another type of crystal. Was this just decoration? Was it a symbol of power? Or was it to enhance the mysterious properties inherent in the pyramid? Recently, scientists have created what they called the Superman crystal, named after a device shown in the Superman films. This invention can store an astonishing 360 terabytes of data on a tiny piece of glass, which is another kind of crystal, less than half a postage stamp in size. This recording medium has a lifespan estimated at around 13.8 billion years, making effectively everlasting. Because of mining and tunneling, etc., we are mostly aware of what lies beneath our feet and are starting to understand just how complex the subterranean world really is. Because there are indications that there could be entire cities deep below us. Is this feasible? The answer is yes, and they could lie within a huge area known as the Moho. The Moho, or the Mohorovičić discontinuity, stretches right around the planet, and it lies beneath the crust and the mantle. It was discovered in 1909 by Andrija Mohorovičić, a Croatian seismologist, and it is located about 8 kilometers beneath the ocean floor and 32 kilometers beneath ground level. Although normally shown in neat, regular slices, the layers that comprise the planet are far from regular, and the boundary of the Moho consists of immense gaps and cavities. Some of them are vast and could indeed contain a small city or anything else for that matter. While this might include an unknown subterranean race of people, it would equally make an ideal hiding place for an extraterrestrial race that wished to remain concealed. There have been many instances where UFOs have been seen emerging from caves dotted around the planet. UFOs have also been seen entering the Earth in a similar manner. Are they based in the hidden cavities of the Moho? Perhaps strangest of all is the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, who after his death on the cross reincarnated in a cave. The only evidence of this is his burial shroud, which bears the imprint of his body, and this may have been created due to a burst of energy released by the properties of the cave. Likewise, Christ was also born in a cave. Yet another factor in this, that churches were often built above caves and other ancient cities of worship. Was this instinctive, or did the builders know something that we do not? One example of this is in Rome at the Basilica of St. Clemente, where the basilica is built directly above a temple of Mithras, and these temples were always in caves. There have been a few written accounts of underground and possibly extraterrestrial races. One such comes from the author, the late Richard Shaver, who along with his publisher Ray Palmer wrote tales of warring entities hidden deep underground, of which he claimed to have had personal experience. This was a fundamentally evil ancient civilization called the Deros, who lived in caverns under the earth and used fantastic technology against the human race, and frequently kidnapped them for their own nefarious purposes. The technology they used originally belonged to the benevolent extraterrestrial race from whom they were descended. There is another account from an Englishman, Edward Bulwer Lytton, who wrote a little-known but influential book entitled The Coming Race, which elaborated upon the concept of a subterranean, superhuman civilization with noble and honorable ideals emerging as the savior of the human race. Here the energy source was referred to as Vril. This is quite the opposite of what Shaver had in mind, and perhaps the beings that Bulwer Lytton wrote about were guardians protecting humans from attacks of Shaver's evil Deros. If this is the case, then, perhaps instead of seeking answers to ET contacts in the depths of outer space, we should turn our attention to inner space and the hidden depths of our own world to find the answers, because that is where the evidence may lie. There are a great many places around the world our ancestors thought were of special significance. Locations held sacred and revered as places of power and healing. What marked these places as being so different, so unique, that cairns, temples, and eventually churches were built there? The answer is obscured, layered in magic and legend. Protected true believers who prefer to attribute the inherent, unique properties of supernatural agencies rather than naturally occurring forces. The entire world is crisscrossed by a network of lines of power, geomagnetic energies generated by the planet in the inferno of its rotating, molten iron core, like an incredible, gigantic dynamo. These lines of power have also been referred to as ley lines or lays, and spread out like the filaments of a spider's web, carrying natural magnetic force all over the world. They have become associated with UFO sightings and other paranormal events. This is not really surprising, because there seems to be a deliberate plan regarding various structures like standing stones erected on or adjacent to the lays. There is one use of conventional interaction with geomagnetic energy that is perhaps the best known of all: the skull of the dowser. Perhaps this aspect is the most elusive yet common practical use of earth magic known to man, and each one of us can be taught the skill. The ability is probably present in our prehistoric ancestors and is recorded in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. The normal function of dowsing is the location of water, which creates an ionising stream as it moves through the rock strata, which in turn produces an increase in local field strength. The dowser, who, through experience, recognizes it as a reaction to the presence of water, detects this. If the purpose of communication with the gods or aliens, as some say, it is likely that the stone circles are permanently manned rather than only at specific times or holy days, so instantaneous communication may be nothing new. But things can get a lot deeper. In fact, beneath our feet are uncharted caves, caverns, and tunnels that crisscross the world entirely out of sight. Just what is down there? Do they perhaps contain knowledge from the past that we have forgotten or perhaps never even knew about? It is possible that there is evidence of extraterrestrial links here, evidence that remained out of sight, perhaps for our benefit and safety. In 2014, ancient cave patterns were discovered inside caves near the town of Charama in the Kanka district of India. These images, which are 10,000 years old, show thin, faceless beings standing beside a strange-looking object, a machine perhaps, supported on what looks like a tripod undercarriage. The archaeologists who made the discovery have asked for help from the Indian Space Agency and also NASA to help identify the images. The local people, some of whom worship the paintings, tell of the Roela people, also called the Small Ones, who used to arrive in round flying machines and remove one or two of the villagers, who were never returned. There is a history of visitations like this in India, especially in the ancient Hindu texts like the Vedas, and especially the Mahabharata. Both of these texts tell of gods coming to earth in their disc-like machines, and also what amounts to the ongoing abduction of earth people by these gods, and this was anywhere between 4,000 and 10,000 years ago. It seems that alien abduction is a far from new phenomenon. There are rock paintings from places as far apart as Algeria and Australia, and all depict a variety of strangely similar beings that seem part animal and part human. Why should these bizarre similarities exist between cultures separated by both distance and era? Because this cannot be a simple coincidence. There is a modern tale that may answer some of our questions. The Montauk project, and all that went with it, has tantalized researchers for decades and involved a series of top-secret U.S. government projects that took place deep below ground in Montauk Air Force Station, which is located on Long Island in New York State, USA. Claims that research into the viability of weather control, time travel, and incredibly, how to contact alternate dimensions was carried out. In addition, there are also claims that a 50-foot-tall pyramid made of titanium was constructed entirely underground. It is speculated that the alleged esoteric and magical properties inherent in the pyramid shape were part of the experimental procedures. Was this a modern attempt to contact alien gods? But how did these aliens travel across vast distances? In order to travel the distance required, alien craft would have to travel at multiples of the speed of light, and in doing so they would experience considerable temporal distortions. In other words, experience a degree of time travel. This is not a fantasy. It is proven fact using our own understanding of physics. The usual answer to this is that the ETs use some form of exotic subspace warp drive or hyperdrive or some other means of propulsion. From a practical point of view, this is technically unfeasible, if not impossible. One of the theories holds that everything we do, every single action we intend to take, exists as a series of probability waves until we decide on one definite course of action. The probability wave then collapses into reality and therefore exists in this universe, although it could equally happen in another one, but in a slightly altered manner. The other theory suggests that according to superstring theory, we exist in a series of membrane universes, all comprising only 2 dimensions, although obviously we see our own as having 3 dimensions. What exists on these M-branes is anyone's guess, but it is just possible that given the right set of circumstances, whether produced artificially or naturally, contact can be made, and it is there that these exotic creatures may reside. With the possible existence of these hitherto invisible regions comes the strong possibility they are inhabited by beings we call aliens. Dr. Terence McKenna neatly characterized the situation with the following statement: "We are part of a symbolic relationship with something which disguises itself as an extraterrestrial invasion so as not to alarm us." This deeply insightful observation does indeed cover most of the bases and aligns UFO experiences with the spirit quests of various shamans who have consumed a range of hallucinogens such as peyote, mescaline, and of course ayahuasca prior to encountering a range of strange and unearthly beings during their journeys. The odd thing is that the beings they encounter tend to be the same or similar, and they also share many resonances with the entities observed during UFO sightings. Quite what this implies is not clear, but it does seem to infer that somehow contact can be made at levels other than physical. In the Old Testament, chapter 1 of the book of Ezekiel recounts a vision in which Ezekiel sees an immense cloud that contains fire and emits lightning and brilliant light. It states the center of the fire looked like glowing metal, and in the fire was what looked like 4 living creatures. These creatures are described as winged and humanoid. They sped back and forth like flashes of light, and fire moved back and forth among the creatures. The passage goes on to describe 4 shiny objects, each appearing like a wheel intersecting a wheel. These objects could fly, and they moved with the creatures. When the living creatures moved, the wheels beside them moved, and when the living creatures rose from the ground, the wheels also rose. What on earth had Ezekiel witnessed? Probably nothing on earth at all. This is obviously an ancient man's depiction of a UFO lighting up the sky. In fact, the Bible is full to the brim of alien history. There are powerful holy weapons that are capable of wiping out mankind, such as the Ark of the Covenant. There are angels flying down to earth, ladders to the heavens, a Messiah rising into the sky back to the heavens, floating beings walking on water, shape-shifting, and so much more. All of this needs to be reappraised in a new outlook, an outlook of ancient alien visitation upon planet Earth. The history of mankind shall remain incomplete until we do. However, there is more to the tale. In the Bible and the Book of Enoch, these shining ones are called angels, archangels, or cherubim. Of course, we must not forget the seraphim of Numbers 21:6 and elsewhere. These are not mystical beings. They have hands, a face, legs, but they do have powers from God, because they are in the light, and they have the symbolic wings of the early shaman, the bird flight, the dreamtime trance ability to fly. Their name means shining ones or fiery serpents. They are enlightened beings via the power of the serpent. Mystical Jewish literature tells us that the angels can fly, tell the future, shapeshift, speak Hebrew, and are emanations of the divine shining light. In the Old Testament, God is indistinguishable from the angel or messenger known as Yahweh. He looks the same and acts as his representative. There is no difference here from Babylonian, Egyptian, and shaman practice. In the New Testament, the angels actually take part in the judgment at the end of times. Alternatively, they may be those who had experienced enlightenment and then fell from grace. We are told that the nephilim, or watchers, are the angels who seem to have been the military arm of these shining ones, and who were initially employed to guard the Garden of Eden, then began to mix with the indigenous peoples of the area. From this union, a hybrid race was produced, a race of giants, so we are told. These insurgents also passed on knowledge and taught them combat and how to make weapons. All this was seen as a violation against the set of laws laid down by the Shining Ones who were possessive of their knowledge. Enoch, a scribe who was taught by the Shining Ones, was then employed as a messenger or intermediary between the Shining Ones and these fallen ones who had decided to abandon their divinity to live amongst the tribes of man. Enoch was then sent to tell the insurgents that a severe sentence had been passed on them and that they were soon to be punished. In brief, the punishment sent is the flood. It is as if the Shining Ones wanted to wash away the sins of the earth that had been created by their own kind, the fallen ones. So are we still being watched? There are watchers found in the Old Testament book of Daniel and later sources. And given the era, they are assumed to be angels. In Daniel, they are obedient angels or benevolent overseers. But as we have seen in the book of Enoch, they are referred to as fallen angels. In both cases, it is recognized that these so-called angels came from above, which again, given the era, was heaven. The concept of space travel, let alone beings from other worlds, was thousands of years in the future. Both of these biblical sources imply that everything that has ever occurred that affected the human race was brought about by the actions of these angelic watchers. In the case of the Book of Enoch, which was part of the Dead Sea Scrolls, we find that Enoch was taken aboard a fiery chariot that took him to heaven. However, nowadays this could equally mean that Enoch was taken aboard a spacecraft, and while on board, Enoch spoke of lights shining through crystal walls and illuminating the entire craft. This book specifically mentions 200 watchers who were tasked with overseeing the human race and taught them about astronomy, medicines, and the use of metals. This process is reflected in various civilizations, the Inca, for example, and their creator god, Viracocha, who was the father of all Inca gods. As we have seen, our ancestors all seem to have been taught by beings they refer to as gods, but were they really powerful extraterrestrials? They all fulfilled the same function and were the same race, known by different names, especially to the ancient Sumerians who called them Anunnaki. It was the Anunnaki who was assumed to have passed wisdom to the human race, and are also said to have come from the stars. Much of this myth of the Watchers is found to be within the tales of wars and merging of peoples across the Middle East between Canaanites, Egyptians, Sumerians, and even Asian civilizations. But the underlying current is a belief in the Shining Ones as leaders, with Watchers doing their bidding, evolving into God with his angelic beings. The terms Anunnaki, Anakim, and even Nephilim means those who came down to earth from heaven, and is a reference to their position and location on the plateau of Eden. They looked down on the people below and watched, something that would sound very familiar to thousands of people around the world today who have experienced alien visitations. They represented the sun, moon, and planets on Earth. The truth of the story of the Shining Ones and their watchers has been the subject of a purging of many Jewish authorities who were understandably concerned that the myths of these angels and their worship would distract people from the worship of the one God. To this end, the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees mentioned previously were stricken from the accepted list and are now known as Apocrypha. What we do know, though, is that these watchers continued in what has been described as the underground stream and were called egregores. They somehow bred with humanity and melted away. Very soon, massive secret societies emerged that fostered the original teachings of the Shining Ones. So, were these beings creatures of God, or were they from an entirely different but physical, non-earthly point of origin? In fact, the whole thing is steeped in ambiguity, as there are three quite different streams of thought here. Along with the traditional angels and demons, there are the Watchers and the Nephilim. Although a bit later they both seem to morph into the decidedly extraterrestrial Anunnaki. Encouraged by their leader Semyaza, they decided to abandon their role as teachers and instructors and have relations with the human women, and the end result were the Nephilim. The problem was that as they grew up, the Nephilim, who were half-human, half-angel hybrids, became warlike and violent. They are said to have been cannibalistic and sinned against all mankind and God, who in this case could be compared to an extraterrestrial project manager, was far from pleased and launched his own reprisals in the form of the Great Flood against them. This presents a problem because it clearly says that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. The two words, also afterward. In fact, the presence of the Watcher gene may still exist and has been found in many tall, human-like skeletons that have been discovered, and they had special magical powers. In ancient times, both church and state regarded magic with a mixture of profound suspicion, fear, and loathing. Those who practiced and studied its arcane arts or sought mastery over them were often put to death in the most hideous ways imaginable. Yet, nowadays it has secretly been turned into an undetectable weapon of war, financed by secret and unaccountable black budgets, and those who seek the methods to make it work have become modern sorcerers. This was especially true of the Russian KGB and its American counterpart, the CIA, both of whom collaborated closely with the respective armed services in their relentless quest for the ultimate weapon. One of the men chosen to work in this unlikely field was the extremely capable former Special Forces operative, Colonel John Alexander, Ph.D., who deserves much closer attention. This man came to accept that ancient concepts and experiments, which in any other context might be described as magical, could be harnessed for military advantage. It is arguable that this man may have even warranted the once feared title of sorcerer. He was evidently extremely talented in the methods of extracting information from unwilling people and was also a keen advocate of military applications of the paranormal, which his associates frequently termed as pseudoscience. In fact, he had something of the X-Files about him, and one can only wonder if Chris Carter, the creator of that unique program, actually based any of his characters on him. Surely these life forms are curious about the same things and have pushed out into the universe to find the truth. We must not forget that similar projects were underway in the USSR and other countries. These include techniques designed to allow soldiers who had been suitably trained to literally walk through walls, become invisible, and read minds, all within the remit of the Watchers. It may seem rather odd, but one can almost understand why a human being might just be able to pass through a solid object. At first sight, the project seems impossible. A solid object, say a wall or door, consists of atoms and even smaller particles existing at specific frequencies. The person who consists of particle wall or door acts as a barrier. However, if one could somehow change the frequency of the person or the obstacle, then the theory goes they should be able to pass through the solid object. Maybe the genes of the Watchers allows this to happen more easily in some modern humans. Such is one of the possibilities faced by those who have accepted that their offspring belong to the so-called Indigo children. Babies that, although born naturally of human parents, are credited with being children of the stars. Their parents are regulated to little more than caretakers charged with their earthly welfare and upbringing, until such times as they are able to look after themselves. The children appear to possess exotic talents and abilities. Chief among these is the facility to channel information from their real extraterrestrial parents, coupled to a range of psychic powers, including healing and natural telepathy. It is well to consider at this point that claims made of individuals who are or were here on Earth to assist in spiritual revolution are not new, and many iconic and spiritual figures such as Christ, Mohammed, Abraham, Buddha, Osiris, Tammuz, and other spiritual leaders were sent to save the human race from its own failings. All of them, according to the era and society they arrived in, were able to convert huge numbers of people to their cause, and indeed the majority still command disciples and believers numbering in their tens of millions. This is a concept which, broadly speaking, means that the more people who come to accept the new idea or practice, the more people are likely to display the same practice whether they consciously learn it or not. In other words, according to the innovative biochemist Professor Rupert Sheldrake, an invisible field of information energy surrounds us that, in the right conditions, percolates into us almost by a type of osmosis, or more correctly, we inadvertently receive it like organic radio or TV sets. We can, in fact, open portals. Modern-day research regarding UFOs occasionally mentions portals, or as our ancestors referred to them, Stargates. It is speculated that these doorways were and are utilized by extraterrestrials from other realities. One of the most talked about doorways is that of Ayumarca in Peru, or as it is better known, the Gate of the Gods. The native tribesmen say that the larger doorway was used by the gods themselves, and the similar one used by mortals. They also said that the gods were giants, and on occasion mortal humans could become immortal if the gods decided. Only those thought to be courageous and honorable were granted to live amongst the gods. Legends speak of one such mortal during the 16th century, at the time when the Spanish arrived in Peru to loot Inca riches. A high Incan priest by the name Amaru Maru fled the temple with his golden sun disk. This was a treasure that was revered by many and was called the key to the gods of the seven rays. Amaru discovered the Gate of the Gods at Ayumarca and noted that the doorway was continually guarded by several shamans. Once he presented them the sun disk. The shamans conducted a ritual consisting of meditation and chanting, and after a short time, Amaru started to feel a pressure build in his ears. Then suddenly, a bright flash emanated from the gateway. He turned to see the smaller doorway open, and beyond it was a shimmering light. Leaving the sun disk behind, he was able to pass through the doorway and on to another reality. It was the reality that the shamans called the Land of the Gods. In modern times, investigators and researchers visiting the location discovered an interesting indentation in the rock on the right-hand column of the smaller doorway. On close examination, they found that a slim disc-shaped object could, in fact, be inserted into the indentation and be held there by the surrounding rock. Was this some type of keyhole in the door? If so, then Amaru's sun disk may have been appropriately named. Some people visiting the location have managed to capture strange energy emanating from the doorway. Several years ago, some researchers visiting the gateway conducted a number of acoustic experiments that led one of them allegedly vanishing for over 20 minutes. 7,500 miles from Peru lies the site of Abu Gharaib in Egypt, which is another location steeped in myth and mystery. Said to be one of the oldest sites on the planet, Abu Gharaib sits on top of an alabaster platform. Alabaster is sometimes known as Egyptian crystal, and it is claimed to have been attuned to Earth's frequency of 7.8 Hertz. It is theorized that this low frequency can enhance human senses of communication and align human consciousness with sacred energies. Just as in Ayumarca in Peru, Abu Gharaib is thought to be the location of a doorway to the beyond. Egyptian legend speaks of communication and travel between the worlds of mortals and gods, almost mirroring those of Cherokee Native Americans, whose traditions talk of formless thought beings who travel on a wave of sound from their home world in the Pleiades star system. As well as Abu Gharaib being referred to as some type of Stargate, there are also signs of what some would perceive to be advanced technology having been used to create the site. Precise circular holes have somehow been drilled into the alabaster. For millennia, ancient man hunted and gathered like many animals on our planet. But something happened. Something amazing. Suddenly, after thousands of generations, mankind settled down and civilization emerged. Soon, humanity was ordering its own society. Creating rules and regulations, laws emerged as if from nowhere. Complex tools, art, literature, agriculture, transport, and more emerged as if by magic. We looked to the stars, to the very heavens above us for navigation, inspiration, and to inform us of the time of day and even year. We built huge monuments to the gods we saw above us, to the same gods we claimed had come down to us from heaven and given us knowledge and life. A new phase in so-called evolution had begun. A new humanity had emerged. The gods were aliens. The change in humanity was genetic. The knowledge was given to the chosen few by the ancient watchers over mankind. This is their story, from the Egyptian gods to the Greek pantheon, from the bizarre array of Hindu deities and their flying machines to the alien messengers of the Bible. This is a story of profound importance and terrifying proportions. We have two choices. Mankind evolved over a vast period and then suddenly changed overnight from wandering bands to complex civilized societies. Or Ancient man was chosen by a visiting alien race to be genetically modified and then given immense knowledge. It may sound crazy, but both ideas may be equally so. These ancient astronauts gave humanity knowledge, religion, and culture. It was a mirror of their own mother culture. They aided in the building of huge and complex structures across the globe, from the pyramids of Egypt to the stone heads of Easter Island. They aided us to worship them. Over time, our memory of these alien visitors has become our religions. The giants of the Bible are everywhere. Millions of people around the world have witnessed UFOs. Millions have undergone some bizarre experience, from tunnels of light to out-of-body experiences, from alien abduction to visions of unearthly apparitions. Millions more remain silent through fear of being ridiculed. The fact is, what modern man is experiencing is not new. In fact, it has been going on for millennia. The various recorded histories of the world reveals the truth. We are told about the experience. We are given the knowledge of amazing machinery. We are even given the names of those ancient gods who gave humanity incredible knowledge. We know them today as the Watchers. They came. They taught humanity art, culture, architecture, agriculture, and science. They became masters over mankind, and a hybrid race was born. But all was not well in Eden, and a great battle ensued. This is the incredible story of mankind's ancient past, and its link to the millions of alien-related stories in our modern era. This is the story of the great lights that descended from the sky and watched over mankind. We live on a very big planet in an even bigger solar system within a massive galaxy that is only one of trillions inside a vast universe. With every passing day, scientists are discovering that life exists in places they previously believed to be barren. They discover water in massive deposits on distant planets. They find fatty acids on Mars and strange gas plumes that should never be there. When we walk into the desert on our own planet, we say that there can be no life, and yet nature finds a way. The truth is that the deserts of our world are teeming with life. We just have to alter our perception and search a little harder. If life can find a way in searing heat in minuscule amounts of water, then surely it can find a way somewhere in the vast universe. In mankind's short history, we have moved rapidly from sticks and stones to atomic weapons and smartphones. And yet, there are galaxies out there, billions of years older than our own. Somewhere out there, alien life forms exist, and somewhere they have technology so advanced that it will be beyond our own imagination. Of this, there is no doubt. Surely these life forms are curious about the same things. Surely they have pushed out into the universe to find the truth. They must have found us, and shouldn't we have evidence? The fact is, we do have evidence. We have it in abundance. aliens have reached out. They have found us and have visited us. Across the world, thousands of men and women have seen with their own eyes the visitors. They have seen their craft. They have even come into contact with them. The fact is, there have been dozens and dozens of UFOs to have reached our planet, and we have witnessed them. What are they doing? Our secretive military and inner governments know what is happening, and they are hiding it from us. They close down every site, cordon off recover technology and corpses, and then cover up. They have been doing so for decades, and we are being fooled. Why? As we have seen, there are more things under heaven and earth than meets the eye. Modern science is continually revealing that our ancestors were more in tune with other realms of existence than we currently realize in our materialistic world. What shall we discover in the future? Maybe we will find the key to unlock another dimension where the aliens or gods reside. Maybe we will come face to face with our makers. One thing is for sure. We must maintain an open mind to all possibilities.